So in this video today, I want to speak specifically about using the Myers-Briggs to communicate with your coworkers and or boss. And so hopefully you've seen the first video in this series that kind of introduces the concepts of the Myers-Briggs. And this video is going to talk specifically about how to use them at work, and if you are in a management position, how to use them with your team. So let's start with extrovert versus introvert. So the extroverts, again, are the ones who talk to think, and whose default attention is kind of on the external world, where the introverts can be very, very social, but their default attention is on the world of ideas in their head, and they often do not speak until they have really thought through concepts well. So you can imagine where at work there's a lot of conflict and tension between these two types. So extroverts are talking to think. And so they're great in brainstorming. That's their natural way of communicating. Where introverts, when they do speak, they've really thought things out. So they do the brainstorming in their heads rather than out loud. So I would say when a business situation really requires someone to be very diplomatic, to be very careful, you're in a legalistic type situation, negotiating a contract, really an introvert is the better choice because they're not going to inadvertently say something that makes it harder to negotiate the contract or that will get you in some kind of legal situation. So introverts tend to be better suited for high tension, high stakes conversations because they don't accidentally put their foot in their mouth, where extroverts tend to do that a lot. But extroverts are extremely good in engaging a group, getting everyone to feel involved, helping everyone to feel safe, help brainstorm, getting ideas going, and to really help build cohesion in a group. And so again, we are all benefit by developing both sets of skills, but the extroverts versus introverts can shine in different light, in different contexts in the business world. Another important thing when you have them in the same meeting, extroverts can talk and talk and talk. And often when an introvert finally speaks up, they are presenting a very well thought out idea, which we can't always say about extroverts. I'm an extrovert, so I'm insulting myself here. So when an introvert speaks, and especially if it's a highly introverted person, and you interrupt that person, which is actually considered fairly polite in extroverted worlds, often they can lose their train of thought. They can feel very offended. And they may not be able to fully get out their idea or may not even want to. And so you need to also, especially if you're managing, if you're chairing a meeting, if you're managing a meeting, to make sure you're allowing the proper space for each type to communicate their ideas fully so every member of the team is heard and valued. So next you have the sensing versus the intuitive types. So the intuitive type is the strategist. They are the big picture thinkers. They see how all the parts work together. So in work situations, it's very important that this is very important in terms of who gets what job. So again, the strategy and the big picture, designing the system is the intuitive one. The detailed oriented person is making sure all the parts line up and they work together. And so two very different minds, two very different sets of skills they bring to the table. So, for example, the intuitive type might, write the basic text of a contract, but the sensing type is the one who goes through, and each time a contract is issued, they're making sure all the details are correct. And that's how you can use your team and use their natural strengths to the best of your ability. And I've noticed in work context, this is often the hardest for people to shift into. People who are sensing types take many years in a profession before they can do the intuitive big picture work. And the intuitive types are, especially if they've been in a position or a field for a long time, it often becomes very hard for them to do the detailed oriented work, or they need those many years so that they can track all those details. So this is one where longevity in the field often helps you to develop skills, that are opposite your non-dominant preference there. So thinking versus feeling, again, this is an area where we see lots of interpersonal conflict in the business setting. So in a business setting, all things being equal, with most decisions, you have to weight being fair a little more highly than attending to everyone, how everyone feels about a decision. That's the opposite of interpersonal relationships. So in the business world, things need to be fair and logical. But oftentimes thinking types are very direct. They can come across as very insensitive, and they can actually, and they can really rupture relationships because of this. So the thinking types, it's very important that is a leading edge, in a business context, but it has to be counterbalanced with compassion and kindness. Where the feeling types can often feel very easily offended that their feelings are not being taken into consideration, and sometimes that their feelings should be taken more into consideration. Sometimes, the nature of the business world is that it's not always about what makes everyone happy in the room. And so the feeling types can struggle with that. On the flip side, the feeling types are usually the ones who can build relationships. They make everyone feel connected. Similar to, especially if you've got an extroverted feeling type, they're the glue. They are the ones who make it a pleasant place for people to work. They're the ones who remember the birthdays. They're the ones who make it a place where you feel good about working. And so the feeling types bring a lot to the work environment, and they are the ones who kind of understand the emotional side of whatever business you're dealing with. And then finally, you have the judging versus the perceiving types. And so the judging types are the ones who are good at making decisions and keeping a system going, and to keeping a structure and keeping policies and enforcing policies and procedures. They like policy and procedure, and it fits with how their mind works, and they're very good at maintaining that for the organization. With the perceiving types, they don't really enjoy the structure that much. They typically tend to like jobs or are drawn to jobs that don't have tons of structure, but they are the problem solvers. They're the ones, when whatever the procedure or policy isn't working, they're the ones who can figure out how to make it work. And they're the ones who can look at things from multiple perspectives to figure out a better way to do things. So they're the more creative problem type solvers. So these two actually get into a lot of conflict when they have to work on a project together. And so as a manager, it's real important to be mindful of, who's got what type and how to help them in working together to solve problems. So the sensing perceivers are very good troubleshooters for things that are mechanical and real world. So if you think of anyone who, plumbers or anyone who works in construction, it's usually a sensing perceiving type because they're problem solving around that sort of thing. Where the intuitive perceiving types are solving problems in the world of ideas. So, someone who troubleshoots for computer bugs, is typically a intuitive perceiver, but if they're the programmer, the one who creates the structure for it, would be the intuitive judging, is one that you will typically see that type of pattern. So it's important to kind of understand how your coworker or boss functions and what their preferences are, and if you're managing a team, to understand how to help the different personalities work better together to get the most. And also to understand for yourself which you're going to be naturally good at, what's going to be less stressful for you to do. And I think when I'm using the Myers-Briggs in career context or helping someone think of what career they should go into, I think understanding what your natural preference is, that usually is what's going to be less draining for you. And so when you're doing things that are opposite, in every job, will draw on all 8 functions, but whatever the primary tasks of your job are, hopefully line up with your the basic functions of your Myers-Briggs personality type. Because the more you have to work outside of what's your kind of default natural setting, the more stressful the job tends to be for you. So hopefully this introduction to the Myers-Briggs in career context was useful to you. And I hope you find it helps you to communicate better with your coworkers, understand them more, reduce conflict, and hopefully even make your job a little less stressful.